Now, one thing I know is that a lot of people who listen to this podcast, while you may be listening to it to learn something, and I hope you do every single time, also a lot of you have a lot of knowledge to share as well. And that's why on today's show, I have a special guest. You could say an extra special guest because he is a podcast listener just like you, who is an expert on something called Alexander Technique. And he's going to share with us how it can help our musicianship, and just in general, our overall wellness, which of course affects all of that. So let's jump right into that. Let's do this thing.
Welcome to the LJS podcast, where you get weekly jazz tips, interviews, stories, and advice for becoming a better jazz musician. And now your host. He's a jazz musician, author, and entrepreneur, Brent Vaartstra.
All right, welcome to the show. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Brent. I am the jazz musician behind the website learnjazzstandards.com, blog, podcast, and videos all geared towards helping you become a better jazz musician. I'm really appreciative of you being here, and like I said, special guest, a podcast listener just like you. His name is Christian Steineder, and he's from Austria, and really excited to have him on the show. He's going to talk about Alexander Technique. He's an Alexander Technique teacher as well as a guitar player, and he listens to the show regularly. He got in touch with me and said, hey, I want to talk to everybody about Alexander Technique because I really believe it can be helpful. So in case you don't know what Alexander Technique is, it's a process that teaches how to properly coordinate body and mind to release harmful tension, improve posture, coordination, and general health. And of course, Christian goes into way better detail of it and how it can be helpful for us as musicians. So I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get right into that interview with my special guest, Christian Steineder. All right, I am super excited to welcome on the show Christian Steineder. He is a math teacher and guitarist from Vienna, Austria. And I know it's getting late over there, Christian, so thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks for the chance to be with you in the show. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do understand that you are a regular podcast listener. How long have you been listening to the podcast for?
Yeah, approximately since 1 year. Yeah, it's a great thing. Thanks a lot for all your work, and thanks for having me here. It's really great.
It's totally my pleasure. I really appreciate having you as a listener, and we got in touch with each other because you had listened to a particular podcast episode, and you thought it would be cool to bring up Alexander Technique, which is something that you are an expert in, and I was so interested in. That's why you're here today. So I'm excited. We're going to dive into that, and I think it's really cool. I think it's cool that you reached out to me. I love it when podcast listeners do that and get to share their expertise because, I know some things, and then we have other guests on the show that know other things, and I know there's so much knowledge out there, even just in our community. So I'm so glad that you are a part of that. But first, just for everybody, before we get started, who is Christian Steineder? What are you all about? What do you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so as you said already, I'm a math teacher. I play the guitar, and most of all, I'm an Alexander Technique teacher. I think the Alexander Technique is a great tool for musicians, and so I'm just happy to share this with your audience and to give you a short insight because I think it's far too unknown. It's such a beautiful gift that I think much more people should know about that. Okay,
awesome. And so how long have you been playing guitar?
Since 20 years already, I guess. So, yeah.
And so was that always jazz that you were studying?
No, I think I started like everybody, like the usual guitar player. So I had I got a guitar from some friend, and then I started with 3 chords, and I was feeling like the superhero and like knowing what to do. And then I stumbled upon John McLaughlin and guys like him, like this. And then I said, no, I really want to dig into guitar. And suddenly there were some obstacles in the way. And this really got worse. And well, I wanted to do it right. I had suddenly some challenges which I could not somehow overcome. And so I really wanted to get a good guitarist, and I had my idols, I wanted to play like the big stars, but I could not. It was just really, I did not see a way out, and I was getting more and more tense when playing and so on. And fortunately, before it got too bad, I got to know the Alexander technique, and this is what helped me out. And so I thought it might be useful for your listeners and for you to somehow discuss this issue and how the Alexander technique can help in such cases.
Wow. Well, I'm definitely excited because I know little about the Alexander technique. One thing is when you originally emailed me about it is I had heard a little bit about it. I've heard of some musicians that have used it before, and I think that's what kind of piqued my interest a little bit is, just learning more about it, maybe, implementing it myself. And now when you're talking about you're having some struggles in your playing that you're having a hard time overcoming, it seems like they're related to the Alexander techniques seem to be the fix. Can you describe some of those struggles that you were talking about in a little more depth?
Yeah. Yes. So, as soon as you try to understand and what you're doing when you're playing, for instance, the guitar, or I guess it's relevant for any musical instrument, and you want to get better, you start analyzing, and you start to thinking and how to improve like the little things. And as soon as you start digging deeper into stuff, usually I think that's our society, you start wanting to do things right in some fashion. And doing things right mean that you are trying to do it with more power, you overdo things. And right. As soon as tension comes in, it's not natural anymore. It's like your whole playing gets tense, and instead of like coming closer to your goal, like playing very well your instrument and reaching your expectations, it all goes down the wrong way, because you're just your focus is on total wrong parts of the body, I would say. Right. So with me, I was focusing on the right hand very badly, and I wanted to move faster, since I had these idols like John McLaughlin, and I wanted to be like totally crazy. And I was really analyzing every muscle of my arm, and it got worse and worse, more or less, that I hardly could play anymore, because I wanted it to do so perfectly that it just all went down like in the wrong direction. So I totally lost like the joy of playing guitar. I could not listen to myself anymore, and yes, and the Alexander technique somehow got me out of this vicious circle. And so that's it. That's a little bit of my story.
That's awesome. That is a really great story. Thanks so much for sharing it. I can relate right away and I've told some stories on this podcast before of just certain people who have pointed out to me at various times, you seem tense, and maybe when I'm trying to do something that's a little bit outside of my reach musically or whatever it may be, I tense up rather than my reaction being to relax, and therefore that actually affects the way I play. And it probably it's something going on probably in the head as well. I'm not a psychologist, but I know that affects me too, and it has affected me. And then some of the moments when I'm the most relaxed physically, I feel the best, and I've had people comment to me before, "Hey Brent, you sounded really great and relaxed when you were playing." And I was thinking back, well, I actually felt relaxed. And so it's funny how there's such a connection between our bodies and our mind, and then of course executing ideas that we have in a creative context. So I'm starting to get the idea of why we're going to talk about Alexander technique, exactly what it is, but I'm starting to get the idea of why it could be important for musicians. But in your own words, what would you say? First of all, let's define Alexander technique for those who have no idea, and then tell me why it's important for musicians to think about.
Yeah, good question. So I would say the first thing that one should note maybe is that Alexander technique is an educational process. It's an education method. So it's nothing. It's something that you learn to formulate it positively, and as soon as you understood something, like when we musicians understood what scales and chords are, you will never forget it. It's nothing that you believe, and you have to like recap it over and over again, but as soon as you understood the principles of the Alexander technique and you learned it, it's fine. So you can go discovering deeper things than yourself, because there are some basic principles. So it's an educational method. That's the first point. The second point, maybe what it should help in general with, is to experience some, to work, to live a life with more ease, with more balance, with less tension, with more awareness, with more mindfulness. And I think that's the way how it works now. So it shifts the way how you behave yourself more from an habitual way. That's I can talk about that later a little bit. So more that we are just guided by automatisms to a more mindful and more aware, self-aware way. And in this way, it does not only address like physical issues, but also psychological issues, because it really makes you more aware of what is going on with you and around you, and you just start playing with that. And yes, that's it.
I love that. And so the benefit for a musician would be just to be more aware of what you're doing, what you're playing, or how you're feeling about your playing, or am I on the right track with that?
Yeah, so it's a general way of awareness, so it's really opening up your focus. This is the biggest part, but usually in a typical Alexander technique lesson, that's the first thing you approach. You approach physical things like really positions, postures, coordination. And so that's the first benefit that one gets when one starts taking Alexander technique lessons, that you analyze the pupil's habits, like physical habits, and try to make him, her experience more ease, how he could do a movement with more ease, how he could do a movement with more use of, his bony structure, with less friction due to gravity, to his own goals. And as soon as you understand as soon as one self-experiences this ease, this physiological ease, you can transfer it to a more psychological ease. And yeah, that's it. Approximately.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so it starts with like more of a physical response that you start training, and then it goes to more of a psychological response, which is some stuff that I have picked up from, therapists that I know. That's kind of what they go through too, as well. As like if you make little changes in your habits or things that you do, and then you start addressing the underlying issues, which is that's kind of an interesting comparison maybe that I'm picking up in my own head there. So let's walk through okay, I am interested in Alexander technique, which is true. And I come to you for a lesson and I'm like, Christian, I really want to get into this. What's something that you're going to tell me right away? Like what would you do to like one of your clients?
So the typical lesson is really, it's an hands-on work. So I would use my hands and I would guide you through movements. Usually it's really everyday movements that you do, especially in the beginning. So you do sitting down or picking something up with your hands and stuff like that, and coming to the floor or lying down, really very basic stuff. And I would observe you, and also with my hands observe where there is tension in your body, and try to give you the experience how to do it with less effort, how to do it with less muscle tension, how to do it more balanced. And and this is very individual for everybody who comes, because everybody has his, her own habits. So maybe I should refer to these habits here. What is according to Alexander technique beliefs, what is the main purpose for us not behaving in an optimal way is that we think that we might behave in the right way, but it's not the right way, is that we evaluate our behavior according to our habits, what feels right to us. But what feels right to us is necessarily not what is entirely the right thing, but just what is, we somehow totally rely on our proprioception, and we think that's it. That's how we go with it. But unfortunately, that's not true, because there are tons of examples when you change something, it feels totally new, but in fact, that's just as equally normal as what you have done before. So if you change your position,
there's just a learning curve to it. It's struggle at first, but the more you do it, eventually it becomes natural, and that's possibly the new way, even though not comfortable at first, is possibly the optimal way to do it.
Totally right. And we learned this throughout many years. So the way we stand, the way we sit down, the way we lift our arm, we did this since we were born, and since we first stood up, we started to somehow develop our habits. And now the Alexander technique comes in, and I try to understand where the habits are and how they can be solved. And this is highly individual. And then I have to check for each person that comes to me, how can I address it, and where can I somehow why can I jump into the client's habits and somehow make them feel something which might seem a little bit uncomfortable, but more easy. And that's the first good experience that one can have with the Alexander technique.
All right. So tell me if this isn't a good example. You can just correct me here. But for you personally, like with your guitar playing, you were mentioning before, you just felt like there's a lot of limitations, like physically and mentally, and all these different things going on. What were some things specifically with your guitar playing that maybe you had to address as pertains to Alexander technique?
Yes. So there is a funny story which I like to tell whenever it comes to my first experiences with Alexander technique and also with guitar playing. I came to my teacher, Alexander teacher. So at first I was taking Alexander technique lessons for several years before I got to the training course and so on. And when I first came to my teacher, and I was like, oh, my hand is so tense, and can we please work on my hand? And she was looking at me, and she was just saying, no, let's start working with your hip. And
oh, wow.
And then I suddenly understood that I was just so naive to think that the hand is just the hand alone, and if I only correct the hand, everything will be fine by itself. But unfortunately, it's not that easy, because the whole body is connected, and the way I sit down, for instance, when playing, or the way I pick up the guitar already and put it on my lap, it totally influences what I will be able afterwards to do with my hand. And so there was a huge, it took some time till I was able to pick up the guitar and really feel ease, and how little effort is necessary until such that you can hit the string. And if you hit the string with, for instance, if you hit the string with such an a light arm, how different the sound can be. But it started with the hip in my case, so it can be totally unrelated to, at first glance, to guitar.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah. I think that's really interesting, and I'm starting to get it. Like as you're saying this, like I'm probably for those listening right now who are in my shoes, like we don't know all about, we're not Alexander technique, pros here. Like I'm starting to get it, and I'm like kind of getting excited about it, because I'm already thinking in my head like, oh, like I know that I have a bad physical approach to some of my. Sometimes I watch videos of myself and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look right, But I guess I didn't know I'd do that with my right hand, and so that's really interesting. Okay, so it really has a lot to do with the body as the whole, and that, like you said, not one part of the body is the culprit to maybe some bad habits. It's everything, and so. Yes. Okay, so let me just ask another question that's coming to the top of my head every single time you say this. So, like, what's the example of like when someone sits down? What's like an example of like that's not a good way to sit down? Like, can you describe that?
Yeah. So, in general, that's also one point. People are always hoping for the recipe of sitting down or standing or doing something
Please
totally
tell
right.
me.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. It's
I
not.
can tell you're not going to give me the answer I want.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, the wrong way, if you want some answer to that, wrong way is any way that is with too much tension. So the Alexander technique always was looking for how can I do something with less effort, and then you start looking where you can somehow solve these habits which cause tension and get rid of some unnecessary tension. And so, for instance, if you sit down and especially if you come to an Alexander technique teacher, everybody wants to do it right. Everybody wants to sit down right. And what this means is she sits down totally straight with every muscle tense in his upper body because he wants to sit straight and wants to sit correct. This is how it starts. And then I start, no, we have the bony structure. For instance, we have our spine. Let the spine do the job. Let the spine sit on your sitting bones. I don't know if you're so the sitting bones are these bones that
pelvic.
Exactly, that you should sit on. And so sit on your sitting bones and let the spine do the job. Let the spine carry the weight of your shoulders. Let the spine carry the weight of your head. And this takes, of course, because they all have the impression, I want to sit right, I want to sit straight. But all they do is they tense their outer layer muscles, which are these huge muscles, and everything gets totally tense, and they're not flexible at all, and nothing is happening, and they're far away from, they're just the opposite direction of sitting right, because they're not using the bony structure, for instance, which could help them to hold their weight. So, and now coming to the guitar. So if you use at most of your bony structure and the least possible of your muscles, then you're on the right track, so to speak. And that's what in my opinion, and definitely Alexander's opinion, one should look for to minimize effort. But yes.
So it's a lot of, and it goes back to something I think you've said already. It's a lot of mindfulness, like being mindful, but it's almost like you can't be mindful if you don't actually know what to look for, maybe. And that's how maybe some of the lessons start. Am I right when I say that?
Totally. There is a little bit this contradiction, which makes it hard. That on the one hand, you want to get rid of tension, but on the other hand, you only have your proprioception, which tells you, hey, I'm sitting fine, I'm sitting totally balanced, because that's how it feels. And that's why a teacher needs to come in to give you new impressions, to give you the feeling what really ease can mean, and what really balance can mean, for instance.
Right.
Yes.
It's like anything, like it's like music. We can bring this back to music. It's like if you need someone to tell you, hey, this is what I need to do. This is the path I need to go down. And even more personally than that, someone to look at you and be like, hey, specifically for you, this is it, right? I mean, there's maybe this general direction everybody should go in, but then you do need from time to time, or maybe even frequently, someone to be like, this is unique to you, what you should do. Okay, this is all really interesting. So now you were also this has to do, you say it starts with physical, it starts with these actions that you do with your physical body, but then it progresses more into the psychological. So how does that work? And if you could, maybe how did that help you in regards to you with your music and the way it made you think that way?
So maybe one aspect, so there are so many aspects, but maybe one aspect, when we are just doing something, we're very often not in the moment. We're like, several things come to our head, like, and expectations are there as well, and there are like trivial things. What shall I go shopping? What will I eat tonight? And all this like trivial stuff come to our head, and everything is somehow preventing us or is disturbing us in being in the moment and like listening to the music and being aware of what is going on around us and also inside us. And this general state of awareness, it's the first step is being aware of what's going on in your body, like that your experience. Hey, I can feel where my hip is going, where my tight muscles are starting to tense, where my arm is starting to tense. And as soon as you're aware of your body, it's impossible that you're writing your shopping list for tonight, but you're just aware. You're in the moment, you're just there, and you're able to listen what is going on. And it's like suddenly that's how I experience it. Suddenly your focus opens up. It's not like you're focused on one thing, one specific thing. And for instance, when playing jazz and you're focusing totally on the harmonies, you totally you forget about what is going on with the rest of the band. You don't listen anymore. You're so focused, and when you're listening, you forget about you forget about the harmonies that you wanted to play, and and then comes the next thing, and you forget about the sound that you're playing, and whatever. You're always focusing on one thing, and you want to do it right. And doing it right usually narrows down our focus. And the only thing that you can do is try to focus less, but try to get as much as possible as like a unity, like everything that is outside you, that is inside you, and try to be open. So in this direction, like be calm, be open, be ready to get any information that comes to you, and not get stressed also by any information that comes to you, but just take it as it comes and be relaxed with it, be open to it. Yes.
Yeah, I feel like when I'm listening to you say all this stuff, I'm thinking like every musician could use that, because it's, it's stressful, and all music has their own things. I'm thinking specifically jazz. Like if you go to a gig or a jam session, like there's so much stress. When you improvise, it's really you're really putting yourself in a position of vulnerability. You're being very vulnerable. You're being very. There's this sense that you might be comparing yourself to somebody else that's in the room with you. You might be worried about what someone might be thinking about what you're playing. There's all these distractions. So what I'm hearing from you, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing from you is like when you're training these physical responses, sitting down in a relaxed way, moving your arm in a relaxed way, all these things, and being mindful of that. At the same time, you're training your brain, your mind, to be mindful of everything else that's going on in your head. Am I on the right track?
Yes, exactly. And that's as soon as one is like starting to get these first experiences, that's really like playing guitar. As soon as you have these first experiences of easiness in the guitar, as soon as you have the first chords, you're like, oh, I want more of that. And it really opens up. It's like an own universe that opens up, like, oh, I can be so open, and I can be so like unfocused, and so everything can be so easy, and I want more of that. And then it's just you want more.
Right. Yeah, totally. So, and obviously you ended up becoming a teacher. And so now you're like passing it on to other people. So obviously like you're a big believer in this.
Yes,
and so could you so obviously I'm sure it's helped you in lots of other aspects of your life too. But like, can you try to put words to what discovering and practicing Alexander technique, how did that affect you? Think about before, when you were stressed and you weren't happy and you almost wanted to quit music, like you said, something to that effect. And then after, Alexander technique, like what was that transformation? Like, could you put words to that transformation of what it looks like for you now when you play music or when you approach your instrument?
The first thing is just very a practical answer. So I react totally different when I come to stumbling blocks, like I can't play a certain phrase, or when I'm overwhelmed with something, then I always can take a step back and calm down and find my balance, and however you want to call it. So in this direction, I'm more easily, or I'm quicker back in the center. It's not like a vicious circle of tension, and I want to do it right and I cannot do it right and stuff like that, which which is just counterproductive, which prevents any progress. So in this direction, it helped me a lot. It's also very helpful concerning stage fright and being overexcited, because you can just, that you have these tools and you can always come back to them. So the Alexander technique, I have not gone into that yet, but there are some it has some principles. It's not like some mumbo jumbo which has no real clear principles, but it has some principles, and you somehow can always come back to them, and they will help you to come back to the moment and be open again.
So
yes.
is there anything that you would want people to know about Alexander technique that maybe we haven't talked about yet? Is there anything specific that would be important to you to say?
Well, about the Alexander technique itself, not really maybe, but I hope this was possible. I can only recommend to try it for everyone. It helped me a lot, and everybody who tried it, whom I know, has really benefited from it a lot. And what I can recommend everybody, and as well, even if she does not want to, or has no possibility to test the Alexander technique, is really to ask yourself always the question, am I taking care of myself? I think that's one point which should be added to the Alexander technique, which is one main point of the Alexander technique. Never forget yourself when you're practicing, when you're on the bandstand, when you're rehearsing for a gig, when you're before a gig. Never do something which harms yourself. There is no need for that. It will not help you. It will not help you to go over your limits, to pressure yourself. It will never be productive. And that's maybe something.
I like that. That's a great reminder for all of us, for sure. I'm so glad that you added that. I can already see myself after this call is over, like getting on Google and be like looking up Alexander technique teachers in New York. I'm pretty excited about this, and I just think I really want to thank you so much, Christian, just for. Well, I learned a lot from you today, so I just want to thank you personally, and then I just also want to thank you for just sharing with everybody else in the audience. I mean, you're a podcast listener. You've been listening for like over a year, which again, I appreciate that, and you're just giving it back, and I really appreciate that. That's so awesome, and you shared your expertise today. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. I know it's going to help me, and so I really appreciate you. I have a feeling that sometime in the future might have you back on. I think it's a possibility. So again, thanks so much for being on today, Christian.
Thanks a lot, Brent. Thanks a lot, and sorry for my kitchen English. I tried my best. Yes, thanks a lot.
No kitchen English to me. I think he's a really great English speaker. Heck, I can't even speak another language. So very jealous of all of you who can speak multiple language. My wife can speak like 3, and very jealous. I should work on that. Anyways, that's enough of that. Hey, again, a big special thanks to Christian. What a great, nice guy. I really enjoyed talking to him. So much knowledge. So really big special thanks to him for just laying down the knowledge for all of us today on Alexander technique. All right, and as I always say, if you got some value out of this show, make sure you leave a rating and review on iTunes. Helps other people know that this is a podcast worth listening to. So just a free way, easy way to give back. Help us get to that. We're trying to get to 200 on iTunes by the end of the year. We're like really close to achieving that. So go ahead on over there and do that. Help us out with that. All right, we're going to be coming out with another great episode next week for you, and I look forward to seeing you back then.
Thanks for listening to the LJS podcast, brought to you by LearnJazzStandards.com. Subscribe to the series on iTunes, and don't forget to join our jazz community at LearnJazzStandards.com/newsletter.